Qualities of effective leaders. Number one, to be clear and clean with your communication. You've had several opportunities to learn about structural meta model and Milton model.
Even advanced language.
Advanced language patterns. So in your communication, you're going to deal with facts, with structure, sensory-based, and keeping it non-judgmental.
Well, and knowing when to be what we might call artfully vague.
Yes.
Because there's all of the language patterns have a positive use, and probably all of them. I'm using, of course, a universal quantifier,
Yeah.
but there's also a not good use.
Ineffective, I call it.
Ineffective is another
Depends on
one.
the context you're hitting on your goal. So, and it's really important to avoid any personal agenda. In other words, as a leader, we can't need everyone to like us, because sometimes we don't have content that everyone's going to like. It's really rare if everyone does, because people have their opinions. So it's important to be strong in your leadership, know where you're going, know what the structure is, and not to have to be important or be liked or to be right. That righteousness is deadly.
And then the awareness of the group, having the ability to track a group and keep the group motivated and on track.
Right. And then the team orientation, ability to support other members of the organization, not only the people above you, but the people that you're working with that are below you, maybe lateral moves, so that you're aware of the big picture of the structure that you're within. So, and when we talk about being aware in the group, there'll be your leaders that you will choose, and we'll get into more of that when we start doing the group dynamics. People will let you know as you're calibrating, as you're going along, how fast you can go or how slow you need to go. If they're getting it, not getting it, just by your awareness of their nonverbal responses.
There are barometers to different things that you need to pay attention to.
And then we've already taught you a lot about being solution-oriented, and I know you're doing well with that, versus focusing on the problem or blaming or that sort of, how bad is it attitude, right? And then number 5 is the ability to accept feedback. 5.
5.
And the ability to be open and flexible and to maintain a resourceful state within yourself.
Right.
And to create resourceful states with others.
And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be perfect. As a leader, what it does suggest is that when you're going to be more effective as a leader, when you have more control of your emotions and you're being flexible to, well, it's like the presupposition, the requisite variety, is the element in a system with the most flexibility really does control the system.
Right, and that's important to remember, that your state as a leader can guide the state of the entire group.
Right.
And then the ability to be authentic again, or honest, and say, if there's a question or a concept coming forward, says, I really don't know, and yet finding a way to get the answer, or assist the person in getting the answer, because sometimes people come to you wanting you to do it for them, and sometimes you need to say, it would be really good if you would do this, and you turn it back on them.
And in a position of leadership, there are times when people will throw something out to check for congruence or honesty. And if you don't know, say, I don't know, I haven't thought of that, or just whatever is the truth, which is another reason it's useful to understand the structure and to be prepared for that.
And obviously, we're going to be doing compelling self-image as a leader that you will put into your own context, because that's extremely important to have that hat that we wear called leadership or presenter or consultant.
Hat?
Hat, right.
Instead of hat?
Yes, right. Interesting. Yeah, that would be a baseball cap, right? Okay.
Sorry.
And it's important to know the policies and procedures of whatever organization you're working within, so that you, first of all, can use them as a backup. We talked about our third point. You'll have your policies and procedures manual that says, okay, someone comes to you with a challenge or a question, you can open up the manual and say, oh, it says here that da-da-da-da-da, so that it's not you having to memorize everything, and you want to make sure you're not contradicting the policies and procedures manual.
And then support a positive environment for all participants and co-workers. And I alluded to that earlier with the hemispheric levels. the environment has to match the goal of the organization or the cause.
Right. And then we want to be talked already about sensitive to cultural variations and diversity.
And not only just being sensitive to it, but learning how to foster the qualities inside of a culture that are going to be useful.
Yes.
And so it's not just accepting it, it's saying, wow, now what else can we learn from this culture?
Absolutely. And then be able to then go, so you have your policies and procedure manual on the inside of the organization, and then monitor industry trends and standards that are there and then keeping up with current trends.
And of course, when we talk about cultures, we're talking about a system. We're not talking necessarily about race, creed, anything like that, religion. We're talking about any group. Three or more, actually more than two, would be a group. And we're talking about any identifiable group is a culture.
Correct. Right. So now on to how to be an effective leader. What are those skills and tools that you have already, I'm sure, that you want to fine tune and make sure that yours are as good as you want them to be? And then how do you foster that in somebody else? Because that's sometimes your job as a sports psychologist, to get that person, if not to be a leader of anybody else, at least to be their own leader for themselves. So again, we want to demonstrate that personal integrity, dressing well, professionally, appropriate for the attire of the given context.
As a rule of thumb, and we'll talk more about this when we do presentation skills, as a rule of thumb, being dressed at one level above what the culture or the group is expected to dress.
Yes. And you would know that in some of your own environments.
Right, and very contextual. A three-piece suit for
Probably not
a
appropriate
workout
in a gym.
group,
Right.
is probably inappropriate, and so there's an appropriateness to it, and that it's, like I say, it's a general rule of thumb.
Yeah. And then of course the trying to be respectful. One of the ways to do that is to be on time, and that means not just on time getting there, but timely in getting your things done, timely in responding to deadlines, just being on time. Which for us right brain leads is sometimes a challenge, so finding out ways to get yourself to be able to do that. Yeah.
I'm sorry, back on the right hemisphere, the challenge.
So demonstrating professional excellence as a leader, attitude and behaviors will be modeled either consciously or unconsciously. So we know that our original leaders that we have modeled are our parents, or those caregivers that we grew up with. They were leaders of us, and we call it parenting. Sometimes not so effective. The people, we're not even conscious sometimes of how much we are a model or a leader for the children that we're raising. Other models obviously are demonstrators of professional excellence would be your teachers, coaches, counselors, those things that we connect up with during our school years. And then obviously with sports, it's in our team leadership.
And peers.
And our peers, right.
And then approach groups and gatherings through the filter of psychogeography or a response to the environmental physicality. So
Yes.
it
has to be safe, as comfortable as possible. And that sense of awareness. Is there water? Is there a good place to sit? Is there shade? Is there
does the person you're
facilities?
working with, are they safe to explore, and are they motivated to explore from the environment?
Yeah. I have one of the coaches that I'm mentoring to be a sports psychologist, and she was working in a room in a large organization where there were a lot of athletes and so on going on, and she was trying to do an interview with a new client, and people were it was a break room.
Oh,
Or a pass-through room, and she hadn't realized that when she started out. And she said every time someone opened the door and go through, the client was just, distracted. Not a good environment for getting any work done. There was no privacy.
Right.
Yeah. So being really aware of your psychogeography is important. In addition to how you're relating, if we're standing on this side or the other side we've showed you, or am I sitting at an angle where I'm going to pull that person to look at me with their left eye because I want a more connection, or through the right eye because they may be in more of a panic mode and they need to be able to get more logical and factual that day. So just those little things of how you set things up so that they're not confrontational.
And then breathe into the role of the leader prior to entering any context in which you will be seen as the leader. So it's one of the things Marilyn and I, before we train, we breathe together. And it's because if we're not breathing together, it will be perceived. We'll be off.
We're out of sync.
Right. And that's not going to be an effective training. It'll still be great, but not as effective as it could be. So it's breathing into that, being solid for whatever role it is that you are perceived as the leader.
And even if you are going to a business meeting, you may have things you're presenting and so on. At that moment you're presenting, you are leader of that information.
Mm-hmm.
So you may not be standing in the front of the room or have the gavel in your hand. However, you still might be
Well, you're wanting
influencing that, yeah.
You're wanting to offer people an opportunity to follow a good direction.
Yeah. And even in social settings, if you're in a group of people at a party and someone new comes in, you may be the person that has the compassion to greet them and make sure they find out where someone that they might know they could talk to. So it's not your job specifically, but there's that compassion.
It's not your job either.
There's that compassion, right, as a natural leader.
And then remain solid and confident in the cause for which you are recognized as a leader. So you've got to believe in what you're doing, and you've got to maintain. If for any reason confidence slips, go find out why. Do your hemispheric levels, do your strategic processing filters, do the presuppositions, do the templates that lead you to the stability.
Right, because sometimes you are caught up in a role of leader or responsibility, and it's really maybe not appropriate. And it's time to exit, so you might need to know that too.
There are less attaboys for leaders than there are for anyone else.
True. It's more rare air at the top, you say sometimes, right? And then maintain and respond appropriately to your personal values. In other words, that kind of goes together. Confidence in the cause, and yet not letting the cause violate my beingness. Good.
Recognize and utilize the ability of others who support the cause. So it's one of the things about an effective support team for the cause is having the broad base. So a leader will help support people in what they're trying to accomplish.
Yes, in fact, that's the leader's job, is to encourage them, to foster them, to move forward, to go into some new area they hadn't done before. Appreciate them, make sure there's a recognition of their talents and things that they have actually accomplished.
And then, this is interesting, paying attention to intuition. And recognize that intuition, and I'll just go ahead and read it, is what happens when information from multiple internal sources creates an idea, even though there may be no conscious awareness of the, this is the left hemisphere. Okay, this is the left.
I guess.
Okay, sorry. I just realized it's an L sentence, isn't it? Okay, starting over here. Recognize that intuition is what happens when information from multiple internal sources creates an idea, even though there may be no conscious awareness of the accumulation of the information or the sequence of thought leading to the idea.
Okay, so you have to learn to calibrate for personal truth and be authentic. So those of you right brain leads, this is Al's left hemisphere, giving you lots of information in one long sentence. So if we would break it down in bullets, recognize that intuition happens. Internally, you have lots and lots of information you might not even consciously aware of that gives you some sort of gut feeling, we'll call it, or intuitive feeling, or a question that says, oh, what's that about?
Those kind of things that if you don't trust it, you regret it in the future.
Right.
More often than not.
Then we want to calibrate inside of me and say, okay, was that just a distraction to get me to procrastinate, or was that really something authentic? So that leads me to, when in doubt, check it out.
Right.
In other words, I'm going to be saying, okay, I have this funny feeling about going to that event or going in this direction for my team. What's that about? And it requires me as a good leader to look inside and say, well, where am I being incongruent? What am I not getting?
Well, and there's such the study in Britain, how many bits of information are people?
7 plus or minus 2.
Right, and then the unconscious mind is processing between
200 and 400 billion.
Yeah, I mean,
the number keeps going up.
We have no idea how many.
Yeah.
So it's all of those little intricate things, like when there's, when a dog barks and it's after 5 o'clock and there's a full moon, we may not know that consciously, but somewhere in the back of our head we might be thinking werewolf or
Or something that's out of sequence.
There's something in there that's giving us information that gets our attention enough to give us an internal response. So the sympathetic and the parasympathetic responses that we get the information, but we may not know it consciously. That's intuition.
Right. So we want to learn to interpret it and say, okay, what led me to that? What did I notice? That a fine-tuned detail and so on. So that's being that.
Intuition is real. What can be debated, and I've heard it debated, is where it comes from. I don't know many people that don't think there's something. The question is, where does it come from? But my personal belief is that there's so much that we know that we don't consciously know we know. And
you'll develop the skill. I know when I'm working on a one-on-one coaching situation, if I hear a voice on this side, I pretty well ignore it because it's just a distractor.
The side I usually stand on?
Yeah.
Okay.
And if I hear a voice coming in on this side, that's my intuitive thoughts that are saying, that's a good story, or go this direction, or probably better back up and do that piece again. So I listen to that voice because that's my sort of, as you'll see when we do perspectives, that's my observer perspective, where the other voices just sort of chatter from history. Mm-hmm. All right, so calibrate the response of individuals or groups to you. In other words, what am I noticing? What impact am I having on this group?
If you walk into a room and everybody stops talking, they're either planning a party for you or you need to pay attention to what's going on.
Right, and we'll talk during presentation skills and group dynamics how you enter the group depending on the group and depending on you and your intention and so on. There's a lot of details about that. But you do have to know when you are standing up here, while you're giving your content, which is one level of attention, you have to also be automatically calibrating the response of the people in the group. Are they fidgety? Is it too hot? Is there some distraction that just went through that you need to acknowledge or incorporate? So you can't just be up here and be a talking head. You have to really be aware, which is what for us in teaching to a camera and to a film, I know you're there on the other side, but it's more difficult because we're not getting your feedback. And that's why anytime you want to email and say, if you have a question or you want to go over something again, that really would be, I would love that. Okay?
Sometimes it's best to let the small details go and point out manageable sized pieces at first. Yeah. We're always looking to build in success. With the exercises and discovery exercises that we have you do, we build in success. Then we stretch, and then we always go back to success for learning.
Yes.
So, as a leader, we want someone to experience the good things about being successful, so that they're safe enough.
Right, and that's kind of what we just did at the beginning. We're constantly rolling things in that you've already been exposed to. By now, some of those should be really automatic for you, and see how else they work. So, manageable sized pieces, then pretty soon 10 little tiny pieces becomes one thought, and so on. They kind of roll together into automatic competency. And you have to, one of the things I say to people is you can only go as fast as the slowest part. Okay.
And then support the ongoing process of the bigger picture or goal. So, and then know what's going on, keep your energy engaged and focused.
And then give positive and useful feedback. So we're going to pause for a moment and we'll come back and work on that part.